I'm David Yepsen. I'm the director of the Paul Simon Public Policy Institute, and welcome to today's presentation of the Ralph A. Dunn Public Service Award to State Senator David Luechtefeld of Oakville. Before I present the award to the senator, I'd like Chancellor Brad Caldwell to come forward and deliver the university's official welcome. Chancellor?
Thanks, David. I am delighted to join you and welcome you on behalf of the university. This award was one of Paul Simon's many great ideas, and we all appreciate the fact that David and the Institute staff continue this important work that Paul started. Just a quick note about the career of Dave Luechtefeld. I can remember Dave as an educator in Oakville, and I can remember on more than one occasion I had the unfortunate privilege of playing basketball against one of his teams. And unfortunate it was, because it wasn't just a little beating, it was a beating. And but he was kind, though. He had his subs in after probably the first quarter or so. But when you're from the grand town of Weber Township or Blueford, you sometimes take those beatings in stride. But anyway, but it's not just the coaching, which is a nice piece. It was the fact that he's a true educator. He's always been an educator. Even in Springfield, he was truly an educator. My father has, believe it or not, a lot of similarities, and this is really why I like Dave so much, is that my father had 49 years in public school teaching. He was a coach, and he was also a member of the Illinois Basketball Hall of Fame, as Dave was. And so a lot of commonalities, and but I've always held Dave and his wife in the highest regard. I'm very glad they're on campus. I appreciate what they do for this campus. I appreciate, matter of fact, all the help that we get from our elected officials, and I was sitting at a table full of them, and I was very pleased to be with each and every one of them. And I just want to say in all seriousness that Dave truly is a wonderful role model. He's an educator, he's a public servant, and a friend to all. So, David, on behalf of Southern Illinois University, Carbondale community, thank you so much.
Before I begin, I want to recognize a few dignitaries who are here today. State Representative Terry Bryant, our Board of Trustees members, Judge Phil Gilbert and Joel Sambursky, former Lieutenant Governor Sheila Simon. Now let's applaud here for everybody. Tracy Bost, our Congressional District's First Lady, is scheduled to be here. Oh, hi. And I want to recognize Appellate Court Judge Randy Moore as well for being here today. Have I overlooked anyone on the Board of Trustees? I don't want to do that now, do I? I also want to recognize my student colleagues at the Institute, undergraduate research fellow Alexander Brock, Adrian Miller, a man of many titles and a student worker, Celia Howard fellow Sarah Moranti, and social work intern Kimberly Palermo. We've also got some Institute emeritus staff here, Matt Bauman, Emily Burke, and Vanessa Sneed. Please, yeah, give them a hand. They do all the work. I also want to recognize our Associate Director, Delio Calzolari, who, as many of you know, is back in Chicago near his family recovering from heart surgery. He tells me he's doing fine. Thanks all of you for your good wishes and hopes to return by the end of the month. He's also our development officer, and he would be upset if I didn't note how we have many of our donors and supporters here today, and to thank you all for your support and remind you to remember us, as always, in your annual giving plans. In a year like this, we really do need your support. I also want to give special thanks to two other of my colleagues here today. Dr. John Jackson is here, and Dr. Linda Baker. I especially want to thank Linda for all her hard work helping our student interns in youth leadership and government days. Thank you, Linda. And finally, especially, I want to thank Carrie Day. Carrie is our marketing and communications coordinator, and with several of our colleagues sidelined today for various reasons, she has really stepped up to the plate to help organize this event. So thank you all. Carrie tells me to remind you to do 4 things. 1, fill out the feedback cards. Are there feedback cards at that table? They're in the center of the table. We really do need to get your comments and input on what we are doing. Secondly, speaking of our interns, we have 3 internships at the State House: the Alexander Lane internship, the Latino Heritage internship, and the Gene Callahan internship. Each of these students will spend a semester at the State House under Linda's tutelage and learning how our government functions, or doesn't, as the case may be. But those applications are for the spring semester are due this Friday. So if you know of a student interested, please encourage them to apply. It is a very, those 3 are very good programs for students interested in public service. Third, there are flyers on the table and on the front table listing our remaining events of the semester. This Thursday evening, we're especially pleased to host Illinois House Minority Leader Jim Durkin for a lecture here at the Student Center. It's at 7 p.m. As Senator Luechtefeld and Representative Bryant can tell you, leaders are busy people, and we are honored he is willing to make the trek here. So please make an effort to attend and encourage your friends to do so too. Paul Simon wanted this institute to be run in a nonpartisan manner, and with his appearance, we've now hosted each of what are called the 4 tops at the State House at one time or another. We especially appreciate his being here because we all seek a better understanding of what is happening in Springfield. The Ralph A. Dunn Award for Public Service was established by Paul Simon to recognize the service of our state's distinguished public servants. It is given to someone who has demonstrated a substantive, positive service in government, public policy, and politics. Ralph served honorably in the Illinois General Assembly from 1973 to 1995, when he retired from the Senate. He was widely respected for his service to the state of Illinois, to his constituents, and to SIUC. He's also highly regarded for his business leadership and for his leadership in many good causes over his lifetime. Previous recipients of this award include Don Clark Netsch, Paula Wolf, Art Turner, and Bill Holland. Dave Luechtefeld began his career in the State Senate in 1995. He served as an assistant minority leader since 2003. He serves as minority spokesman on both the Education and Higher Education committees in the Senate. Prior to his legislative career, he was a basketball coach at Oakville High School for 38 years and a baseball coach for 27 years. Now, unlike many of you, I didn't know him as a coach. I sure can't imagine a mellow person like Dave Luechtefeld playing a Bobby Knight role on the basketball court. I do imagine, though, that someone as tall as Dave Luechtefeld intimidated refs in other ways. He also worked as a social studies teacher and athletic director at the school, as a member of both the Illinois Baseball and Basketball Hall of Fame. He's a graduate of St. Louis University and holds a master's degree from Southern Illinois University at Edwardsville. Senator, if you'd step forward, I'd like to present you with this award. This is the Ralph A. Dunn Public Service Award to State Senator David Luechtefeld for his dedicated service and effective leadership to the citizens of Illinois. Presented today, November 2nd, 2015, the Paul Simon Public Policy Institute. Senator, thank you.
First of all, when this was mentioned, I thought, but as I've gotten closer to it, I think I appreciate it more. I truly do. You've certainly made my day. I can tell you that. I brought my wife along, and I told her, I said, I want at least one person there. And it could be embarrassing if that happened. And I guess early on in my career, I was asked by a candidate who was running for the House. He was from Columbia, Illinois. And I knew him before he decided to run, and he was running against a rather popular Democratic candidate. Some of you might remember that particular race. This guy's name was John Coates. So he said, I'm having a fundraiser on Sunday at 2 o'clock, and I hope that you can make it. In fact, if you can't make it, I'll change the time. Okay, fine, I will be there. I think we had something at noon, a dinner or so. It was getting close to it was campaign year. So we went to that dinner, and then we drove to Columbia. When we get there, he's there, and the county chairman is there. Very nice food, just a really nice place. An hour later, there were 4 people there, myself, my wife, and the county chairman, and the candidate. I thought his comments were really fitting. He said, I guess I didn't advertise this well enough. I said, I think you have a problem. And so ever since that time, I've worried about the fact that I would go to a fundraiser or something like this and no one would show up. So I thank you so much. You certainly have made my day. I was asked they sent me a little brochure on making a little talk, and the talk is supposed to be, they even set the minutes. Supposed to talk 50 minutes, and then you're going to ask questions for 15. So keep that in the back of your mind. But what I'd like to do is switch that around, if you don't mind. We do the 15, and you can ask questions for all afternoon if you want. So, the Paul Simon Policy Institute, I knew Paul. His daughter's here today, and he and I were of opposite parties, but I can't think of anybody who treated me more graciously than he did, and I think that just was his nature. And another thing I always envied him was his ability to know names, to know people. I mean, I've not gotten that quality, and I'm losing it. Some of it too now. I don't know why, but I seem to be losing some of that. But anyway, I can't tell you how much I appreciate you being here, and also certainly the honor. I've been when I thought about what I would say, it sort of kind of brings back your whole life a little bit. And when you do something like this, you probably haven't noticed, but I am getting older, and you wonder, as you get older, you look back on your life and say, what did I do? Was it worth it? Did I change anything? And I've really been a lucky guy. I mean, in life, I know a lot of people who've done a lot of right things and bad things happened to them because they were out of their control, and it didn't turn out the way you'd think it should. And I've been very fortunate. I have had 2 lives, 2 separate lives. One, the coach, and I thought that was enough, and I retired from that. And then this has been longer than I ever thought it'd be. It's been 20 years or 19 years now that I've been in the legislature, and in fact, it's been 20, I guess, yes. So it is something I did not think I would stay this long. Obviously, I've enjoyed some of it. Now, there are obviously bad days, but you know what? There's bad days in any job, and so this has been a very rewarding. I often think that I was able to, part of the reason is I've had so much help. I really have. I found out in life that you don't have to be too sharp if you surround yourself with the right people. And I've been able and lucky to do that. Probably the best decision I ever made in my life, and many of you don't know her. Some of you do. But if you knew her and you knew me well, you would know that she's the smartest one and the rock in our family. And we've been married for 52 years. My wife, Flo, would you stand up? I've had people tell me, and they're right, it's the best decision you ever made. And that was a good one. I'm just glad she agreed. We've been lucky. We have 4 children. They've all made us proud. They're successful people, and you just pray that that happens. Sometimes it doesn't, from parents who are great parents, and it just doesn't happen. We've been very lucky. We have 9 grandkids, and we're proud of them, and they're the love of our lives. There's just no question about it. You know, when you talk about having some success, you know, we all, as you get older, look back and we kind of wonder just what we did. As I said before, I often think that, you know, I've known some people, and you have too, who have had a lot of success, but didn't have a lot of help doing it. You know, they maybe didn't have the greatest home life. They have a lot of money. A lot of not the best things in the world, and yet they have succeeded. And that's quite an honor to be able to do that. I'm kind of just the opposite. I've had it all. I'm a very lucky guy. I had parents who were the best in the world. I mean, we grew up on a farm, a dairy farm. They worked every day, and I often thought that my dad believed it was immoral not to work. I couldn't believe it. You know, it rained some days, and we'd think, you know, we got off today? No, he had something planned in the shed someplace, fixing something. He just believed that, and he worked until he died, and he died at 88. Great parents. As I said, lucky to have the wife I have. Everything around me has been good. And the older I get, the more I appreciate that. And, you know, I often thought that if I had not had at least a little success, I'd have been a bum. I mean, I couldn't miss hardly, you know, doing something right, because I had so much help on the way. You know, I got into this business in kind of a strange fashion. I'm sure that there are people sitting in this audience who never dreamt they'd be here, and never dreamt that you would have done what you have done in your lifetime. And a lot of people, as I look around the room, who've had an awful lot of success. How we get to where we are is just amazing. You know, I asked the kids in school a lot, probably every class I had, what do you want to do? What are you going to be? And you'd be surprised, you know, juniors in high school, sophomores in high school, how many of you know what you want to be? And I'll tell you what, probably 60-70% of the hands go up. They know what they want to be. Now, what I tell them is you don't know, most of you will not be what you thought you were going to be. And I would say that, and if you know at that age, that's great. But I would say a lot of you didn't know. If you were to say to me today, did you know that this is pretty well what you do? Life takes us in a lot of different directions. And I used to tell them, you just have to do a good job where you're at, and usually life will kind of take care of you. If you do a good job where you're at, good things will happen. I thought, from the time I was this big, I knew what I wanted to be. I really did. It wasn't this, I can tell you that. I wanted to be a Major League Baseball pitcher. And from the time I was that big, that's every day of my life I thought of that. And I had some opportunities to sign professional contracts, but I was going to St. Louis University on a full athletic scholarship for baseball and basketball. And my dad didn't think it was a very good idea to quit college and take a chance and be a baseball player. So I was going to finish that, but that's all I wanted to do. In between my junior and senior year, I hurt my arm. And you know, in those days, they didn't fix your arm if you hurt it. And that put an end to my goals in life. But you know what? It's probably one of the best things that ever happened to me, to be real honest with you, because how many people really make it? You know, there are thousands of people try out, and just a few make it to the big time. And I probably would not have been. The odds are I wouldn't have been. So it put me on a path to doing something else. Thought I'd go back to law school. Well, there was a job opening at the Oakville High School for a basketball coach and a history teacher. And I thought, you know, I'm going to try that maybe for a year, go back to college and maybe be a lawyer or whatever. And 38 years later, I had a ball. I truly did. I taught at the same school for 34 years, and coached there for 38 years. And it was wonderful. Never got rich doing it, but it was a good life. My wife taught 37 years in math. And it takes you in funny directions. Now I'm done. Now I'm retired. See, I quit. I was coaching basketball, and my life is, I'm going to play golf 5 days a week, and I'm 55 years old, and life was really going to be good. I was chosen to coach the McDonald's All-American game, which is a West of the United States against the Eastern United States. Kind of a big deal, and they have it on TV and all of that. So I did that, and the writers from St. Louis Post-Dispatch came out and did a story. It was in our house, probably there for an hour, did a story. I knew the guy. As he was leaving, he turned around and he said, "Whoa, Coach, you're really too young to retire. What would you do if you didn't coach?" I have no idea why I said this, but I said, "I've always liked government." The next day in the Post-Dispatch, it said, "Luechtefeld wants to get into government." A fellow by the name of Frank Watson, who was in the Senate from Greenville, who is a sports nut, read that article. And he was aware that Ralph Dunn was going to resign. His wife was sick, and he was going to resign. He called me the next day and said, "Would you take that job if it were offered to you?" And I said, "Frank, my life is perfect. Are you kidding? No way." Frank called me every day for the next 6 weeks. Now, I can tell you this, I probably never said, "No, Frank, don't call me back." Because it is something that, I had taught history and government. I followed politics and government religiously. I read, I watched, I listened, and it was something obviously that interests me, and I taught it. Now, I can tell you, teaching it doesn't make you ready to be a state senator, but anyway, I finally thought, and my wife, she wouldn't help. I'd say, what should I do?" "Whatever you want to do." Now keep in mind, she's always been extremely supportive. Think about being the wife of a coach and a politician. What a terrible job. One story I have to tell you about being a wife of a coach. We're playing Caro at the Benton tournament one day. And anyway, it's a very close ball game. My son is a sophomore. And my kids are all tall, so, in a small school, one of the worst things a coach can have is to have a boy or a girl that is an athlete that is a borderline player. You don't know, should he play, should he not play? You know what I'm saying? And of course, if he plays, it's because the coach is, that's his kid. Or if he don't play, well, then mom's unhappy. But my kids were old or taller, and so in a small school. Anyway, he is probably my best player as a sophomore already. We're playing Caro, and it's a very close ball game, and I'm taking him out, and I'm putting him back in. I'm taking him out, and I'm chewing on him. You're not playing hard, whatever. You need to get, then I put him back in. My wife is sitting in the bleachers watching the game, and there's a kind of a well-dressed guy from McLeansboro sitting next to her, in the green jacket, the whole thing, And he'd say to her, "That's the coach's son. He shouldn't be playing." I'd take him out, put him back in. See, putting him back in again, just because he's her or his son. Well, the game's over. There's another game coming up. I usually go back up in the stands and sit with my wife. So I go back up and sit with my wife's right along the aisle, and this guy's sitting right next to her. And I said to her, "I'll just go down front here and I'll scout the next ball game." He sits, finally he goes to her, "Ma'am, is that your husband?" She said, "Yes, it is." And Flo takes that very well. She kind of thinks it's funny, really laughs about it. Now, some may get mad, but she thought it was kind of funny. A little bit later, he said, "Then number 12 is your son. Am I right about that?" "Yes, that's my son." Finally, he said, "Ma'am, if you don't mind, I feel so bad I'm leaving." So he meant what he said, and so it's tough to be the wife of a politician, certainly, and a coach. But anyway, here's what she would say when I'd say, "What should I do?" "Oh, whatever you think you ought to do." Now, you can't beat that, but that's no help. She said, "Here's what you have to do. You have to tell Frank that you will give a date, the 15th or whatever, and you'll come and tell him whether you're going to do this or not." So I did. I said, "Frank, I'll meet you for lunch at noon in Greenville on such and such a day." Now, here's how undecided I was, because this is not an easy decision, or it wasn't for me, I guarantee you that, because it changes your life a lot. I headed to Greenville. I stopped in Carlisle. I can still tell you where I stopped in Carlisle. Pulled off the side of the road and called my wife. I said, now what should I tell him? And you know what she said? Whatever you think you ought to do. And I didn't have the nerve to say no, and I've done it. And that's how I ended up being in this job. And you know, it has been, and I worried whether it'd be, because it does change your life a lot. There's no question you are busy constantly. If you're doing the job right, you are really, really busy. And it has obviously been good for me. There have been very frustrating times, especially over the last 10 or so years when the state has really had some problems. But obviously, you get a lot of good things out of it. You do. You're able to help some people. And sometimes those aren't big things that you're helping them with, but just to get through the red tape of government, and if you work at that, they appreciate it, and it does make you feel good. When I took this job, my wife says, what you need to do is keep a diary. Write down some of the things that happened. Well, I'm just not good at that, so I did not. But I do have a few things, I think, that are kind of funny things that have happened to me in this business. And in fact, when Governor Edgar, when I became a senator, Governor Edgar called me and he said, I'm going to be in Carbondale. And I think it was the day that Paul Simon took the job at the Institute. And he says, I'm going to Carbondale. I'm going to announce him as being the head of the Institute. I will meet you there and we'll have lunch together. Super, I'll be down. So I came, went to after the thing. He said, let's go to lunch. I said, well, I'll meet you where, no, ride with me. And I thought it was kind of funny because I get in the back seat with the governor. There's a driver, car in front of us, car in back of us. I thought, this is like the mafia. This is really kind of cute. We got protection, and I'm going to be okay. So we go to this restaurant. He likes barbecue, so we go to this restaurant south of here, and we walk in. I love this. We walk in side by side, and there's a guy in the back of the room who was, I guess, a big basketball fan. Because he sees me and he goes, Luechtefeld, good to see you. He comes running up and he shakes my hand, and I introduced him to the guy I was with. I did, Edgar. Yeah. I don't think he's ever forgotten that, really. A couple of other things, and it can make you humble. After I got this job, I go to Springfield. They asked me to come to find out where the bathrooms are and stuff like that. So I went to Springfield one day, no one there but staff, and I find a parking lot. Park in a parking lot. I get about 2 steps out of my car. Here comes a guy. He says, you can't park here. Really? There's not very many people here. No, I said, it's not a parking lot for you. This is reserved. I said, well, I'm a state senator. Really? So he gets on his little walkie-talkie and he calls up there. There's a little building, looks like an outhouse, right by the Capitol in the circle. Calls this guy and he says, what's your name? I said, Luechtefeld. And he calls, and I can hear what the other guy's saying. He said, there's a guy up here that says he's a senator. He's named Luechtefeld. Never heard of him, he says. So he makes me move. So I go to another parking lot. Same thing. Get out of the car. Here comes this guy. Well, this guy was a little more sympathetic. I said, I really am a senator, and I just have meetings in there, and I need a place to park. Fine, he said, I'll call and tell them that they should find you a place in the Circle Drive to park. So I did, and I get in the building. But it can make you humble sometimes that something like that happens. I've also had another situation where, and do you remember Ted Sanders? Ted Sanders was tall, and someone said he looked a little like I did. Well, I got to know him, and one day I get a phone call. Says, your picture is all over campus. Now, do any of you remember that? They put up, I don't know what it was, what was it? Was there a fight between the Sanders and the Union, or was that what it was about? Well, guess what? They had my picture on these posters. This guy that called me says, your picture's all over campus. And he says, what it says underneath you isn't good. But he says the only good thing is there's a name underneath it, and it's Ted Sanders. So a lot of things come into our office that are kind of funny. I had a lady come into my office in Oakville one day, and she sat down. She said, "I need to talk to you." "Yes, what happened?" "The CIA killed my husband." "Yeah." And I go, "Wow, I've never had one like that." And I didn't tell her that, but I said, "You know what, that's a federal issue. You sure you don't want to go see Doc?" So I was going to send her to Congressman Costello. I said, this is his district, and that's where you ought to go. That wasn't good enough for her. She said, "No, you're the guy. You can help me." I said, "Well, do you have any documentation of any kind?" Wrong thing. I should never have said that. She says, "I'll be right back." And so she took off. She came back with a whole load of stuff in her arms. And my secretary, who sits behind a little wall that's about this high, and she can't see who I'm talking to, but she can hear what I'm talking about to. And all of a sudden, she peeks up over it looking, "Who in the world is this?" So she brings in all this stuff. She lays out a picture on my desk about this big a picture. It was her husband on the autopsy table. Yeah. She says, "I guess you see now how they killed him." I said, "No, I don't. I have holes all over him. I get it. But that happened at the autopsy table. It was." She said, I said, "No, what happened? Can't you tell from the color of his skin? They poisoned him." Wow. Now, how are you going to handle that one? Think about that, if you will. Let me know how I should handle that. But I finally, and my secretary, who's very good, said, "You have a phone call, and you also have a meeting to go to." But the lady never came back. So you hear an awful lot of things. Some things I was surprised about when I got to be senator. One was that you can balance a budget. And by the way, the Constitution says you must have a balanced budget. You can balance a budget by borrowing money, moving the payment cycle back, passing a tax, steal from the pension funds, steal from the road fund. Some of you might know about the pension fund thing. And take that money and say that your budget is balanced. It's kind of like if let's say you're having trouble and you have a financial problem in your family, and you can go to the bank each year and borrow $3,000 or $4,000 or $5,000 to balance your budget. Now, sooner or later, you can't do that anymore, and so that's one of the real surprises, that you could do that and get away with it. Another thing that I think that has surprised me is the ability to find good candidates. Now, think about that. The ability to find good candidates. You would think that it'd be easy to find really good candidates. There are a lot of good candidates out there. There's a bunch of people in this room who would probably make good candidates. But think about it. A good candidate is probably someone who has had some success, probably someone who has a job already, and a pretty good one. They don't normally want to do it because first of all, they're making probably as much money as they will make doing this job. And secondly, they really don't want to put up with what you're going to have to put up with. And it changes your life so much. And that is, we really need good candidates. You do. In a democracy, let's face it, if this democracy survives, it will have to be with people who make good decisions. And those candidates make good decisions, but it will also be from an electorate that also makes good decisions. I've always felt that, and I told my students in high school, in a democracy you can have about anything you want if enough people want it bad enough to do something about it. Are you with me? All of those things have to be there. In a democracy, they will finally, people say you can't get what you want. You can if enough people want something bad enough to do something about it. And those people have to make good decisions, the electorate. And of course, the people they elect, you hope you get really quality candidates. They're good men and good women who would be quality candidates a lot of times, but they really don't want to do it. Another thing that it disturbs me a lot with regard to politics is that it's really all about votes. Think about it. Most anything that happens in Springfield or in Washington, D.C. is about votes. What will get me or my party elected? Sometimes it's not in the best interest of what is good for the people and what's good for the state, and I think you've seen some of that here in Illinois. It's about who has control and how you get those votes and how do I stay in power. I don't know how to change that, really, but it is disturbing, and the longer you're there, the more you realize that it is about power. No question about it. You know, I said there were some funny things that have happened in my career, but there are things that are not so funny. They're kind of sad. And I don't want to list those things, but I guess and we've had a few of these lately, and I guess I want to tell you about one of them that's sad. And I think it might be the saddest part of what comes into our office. And it has to do with child custody. Does that make any sense? We have people come, I have calls a lot of times, a call from a grandmother the other day. And she said, my grandson, who is 3 years old, is with his mother, my daughter. My daughter is a drug addict. Her husband is in prison. Then she started telling me some things about herself. She wants custody of that child. And she told me some things about herself that she shouldn't have custody either. You know, she's not had the best life in the world, and she has will not be the right place. The thing that is so sad about it is many times there are no good options. You see what I'm saying? There are no good option for that person. And it's going to be hard for that kid to really survive and then be successful. And as I said earlier today, I'm always impressed with those people who really didn't have a lot going for them and are still successful. But we see, as I said, we see it all. And that is probably the one that bothers me the most. A couple of things in finishing. I was called the other day. I often think awards come when you get old, and that's scary. But I had from the Chamber of Commerce in the Metro East area, in fact, the whole metro area. And the guy asked me, what would you give me the 4 things you're most proud of as a state senator. 4 bills maybe that you passed. And I thought, I don't know. The bills I've passed, have they changed the world? Certainly have. They changed the state? Maybe not. But let me just tell you 4 things that I am the most proud of. One is our constituency and our work with our constituents. And I have one of the ladies here today, Kathy Wills, who has helped me a lot here in the Carbondale area. Another young lady who is in the Oakville office, who, by the way, was Ralph's aide. And she's still young, so she's pretty young. I think she's young, okay? But I think she's 50 or so, and she just does a great job. Honest to goodness, without her, I'm not real sure how to make it. When you become a senator, you don't know anything. You got to have somebody tell you what's going on. And she was able to do that, and she's still with me. But our ability to help people has been the most rewarding part of my job. Other things that I've done that I'm very proud of, and some of you remember this, one had to do with the malpractice. Remember the medical malpractice thing that was going through here? It was huge. Doctors were leaving. I think it was a perfect example of how government can work and should work. As I said, if enough people get upset enough about it to do something about it, you can have change. There was no desire in Springfield to do a malpractice bill, none. But especially in this area, in the Metro East area, the doctors and the nurses got really involved in a big way. And they let their senators and representatives know either you're going to do something about it or we'll find somebody else. And guess what? When politicians find that out, usually something will happen. Now, I know the Supreme Court has declared it unconstitutional, but I do believe that it really changed a lot in the medical profession. Doctors aren't leaving as bad as they were before, plus the fact that the rates have gone down. And it is, and I was the leader of, was the spokesman on the Republican Senate for that. Another one was the wine council. Do any of you remember Guy Renzaglio? You remember that? I was just a senator for about 6 months, and this guy walks into my office. Now, if you knew Guy, if you would have asked an individual, when he walked in, I said, the guy's from Italy and he makes wine. He hadn't even introduced him. Didn't he look like a guy from Italy who made wine? I want to tell you. And anyway, he said to me, we need a wine council. Well, what's that? He told me what it was. Missouri had one, and it had really helped their wine industry. So I said, well, okay, we'll give it a shot. And we did it. And in the process, it really made a difference here in Illinois as far as the number of wineries. I think at the time there was 8 of them in the state. Today there are 100 and some today, and it has become here in Southern Illinois a fairly big industry. Another thing that you may not, but some of you were involved, that I am extremely proud of, and that is the election of Supreme Court Justice Lloyd Carmeier. That was huge. It truly was. I know of no one who has more integrity than that guy does. And he's smart. And someone asked me, I went to school with him ever since we were kids and we're best friends. Someone asked me, what would you say about Judge Carmeier? And I said, and I mean this, there's one thing I knew for sure. I would never be the valedictorian of the class. Guarantee of that. And he's elected and was reelected, and I think just an absolute class act. Again, the last thing I'd like to say is, my wife says try to keep this positive, and I've tried my best to do that. Usually if you've heard me speak, it's not too positive of what's going on in the state. But there's one thing that scares me to death, both nationally and statewide. If anything takes us down as the greatest nation in the world, it will likely be, I think, debt. Debt. You get to the point where you simply can't pay the bills anymore. And for instance, they gave Ronald Reagan, they gave him credit for destroying communism. I don't know about that. I think communism simply went broke. It went bankrupt. And democracy could do that too, both statewide and national. And that is a problem. I mean, there are a lot of legislators, especially coming out of Chicago, that is the last thing on their agenda is how you pay for it. You just simply do it. And we're in trouble. There's no doubt about that, and that kind of scares me. Again, I can't tell you how, you've certainly made my day, and I can't tell you how I feel right now. It's much better than I ever thought it would. So again, thank you so much, and I would now be happy to take any questions that you might have.
Thank you, Senator. We've got time for a couple questions. I'll start off. He's going to leave here to meet with a group of students in our office about public service. One of the things, Senator, I notice among students is a lot of them don't care about politics. They don't want to get involved in it. So, two-part question. There are some students here, there's certainly people here who influence young people. Why should young people get into public service? And what should they be doing now to prepare themselves for careers in public service?
It's a very good question, and I don't know if I have a really complete answer, but I taught history and government, and every class I taught, I tried to convince them that it was good to understand what's going on and to be voters, but be educated voters. America has not, and I tried to point out that America has not been the greatest nation in the world very long. If you want to look at the world itself over years and years and years, hundreds and thousands of years, there have been a lot of great nations who've been in control for 400 years, 500 years, couple thousand years with the Egyptians. Those are the great nations of the world. We've been the most powerful nation in the world probably since World War II. That is not even 100 years. And if 1,000 years from now, if people look back in history and say America, and if we've only been the greatest nation in the world for 70 years, we'll just be a speck. So it is important, again, I go back to if people are educated voters and if they make good decisions, America will continue to be a great nation. Now, how do you convince them of that? That's another story. I tried to get them involved. I tried to get them paying attention, reading, all that I could. But it is really important that we do a better job than what we are doing right now of getting young people involved. If nothing else, not necessarily to be in politics, but just to be good, educated voters. So, again, I don't have a good answer for you.
Other questions? I don't want to overlook anybody. All right.
Thank you. You've been very kind to me. I appreciate it.